Okay, peeps. It's July 18th in the year 2021. And I'm about to go get a bunch of avocado from my beloved dwarf avocado tree. What do we have to say new today? I got accused of basically saying the same things over and over again. And that may be true, but whatever. They can always find another channel, right? I think so. Anyway, well, I'm going to try not to say the same things over and over again. This is a little different today. The tree is probably 15, 16 years old. It's really just a report, right? So, you want to see how it's doing over time. What's happening now is we have some extremely hungry, vigorous deer. And look, they're eating all the way up here, which is kind of a bummer. But whatever, it keeps the tree trimmed from underneath as long as it's big enough. That's something that's new. They've never trimmed it this high before. There's a huge buck I see out here, and he looks at me and he's like, "What you gonna do about it?" Like that. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe eat you? There's an article in the New York Times, I believe, about deer harvesting. I've always been a big proponent of it. The deer are hugely overpopulated here. All these hills. It used to be back in the day that, there were very few places where there was a water source, either like little springs on the sides of hills or, down in the creek. And the mountain lion knew that. So the deer were skittish and the mountain lion was salivating. And that really, there just wasn't a lot of vegetation to eat high up in the higher elevations because there just wasn't any water being pumped up there. Now you have all these gardens with all this like lush stuff all through the hills. They have food source everywhere. So now the deer are dispersed throughout the entire sort of zone. Mountain lions, a little harder to catch them because, there's so many water sources they can't just like wait by one. And so now the deer population is probably, I would say, 5 times more dense. You also had the local Native Americans eating the deer, harvesting them as often as they could probably. And so with that predation of mountain lions, limited food source, limited moisture source, and, humans eating them, I'm willing to bet there weren't many. And the ones that were around, they were shy. But not anymore. They're everywhere. They cause accidents. People die on the side of the road and stuff. So I'll probably get some hate mail on this one. That's good. I always like to see, if you're not like causing waves, then you're not really doing anything. So bring the hate mail and let me know what you think about that. The possibility of harvesting deer from the local landscape. Think about this, guys. You ever traveled down Highway 5 and you look at these massive methane-producing, greenhouse gas-producing, just basically shit piles that your hamburgers grow up in. These massive beasts, like thousands of them all lined up, not a single real plant anywhere near them. I watched a sad documentary the other day about, cattle production insemination. And the poor bull, he never gets to see a girl. The girls, they never get to see a bull. It's just wrong, right? Well, I'm glad. I used to think it would be kind of fun to be a bull that got studded out, but now that I see how it works, I'm like, nah, I'll skip that. But super inhumane. I mean, they're not living in their natural ecosystem or anything. So what do you have here? And they're also displacing a really wonderful native grassland environment of the Central Valley to even be there. The ones that are grazing up on the hills, like the happy cows. There's not a lot of happy cows. They make it sound like there's a lot in California, but there's not a lot. There's some up there. They live a pretty happy life. That's more of a natural life. But anyway, the deer, on the other hand, are basically a really good food source, and they're everywhere. They're a bit of a nuisance. They cause a lot of property damage every year, eating plants and also killing people because, people try to avoid them on the road and they end up in the ditch upside down with their head severed off. And the deer looks at them and then just kind of limps away sometimes. But sometimes the deer does lose the battle of car versus deer, but oftentimes People peg a deer and do huge damage to their car, and the deer will look at them, get up, and just like walk off, like no big deal. But imagine this. Imagine if we had this limited harvest, right, of this meat, and it displaced some of this other meat. The meat created by this deer hasn't displaced any habitat to create. It's entirely sustainable, and it's actually arguably a better thing for the environment. There's probably all kinds of other things that are going on. In fact, there are some native plants that are going extinct because there's so many deer. There's so few predators now that the deer are going wild on them. And you can look that up on the internet, and they're trying to revegetate some places, and they've given up because they can't keep up with the deer browsing. So anyway, it's just an idea. It's not why I turned the video camera on. I really turned the video camera on to tell you about and every pound of deer meat that you produce from places like this was one less pound that needs to displace the native environment and cause those horrific conditions that you see in the Central Valley, where the unhappy cows are raised. There are unhappy cows in California, let me tell you. All right, so what's fun about this year? What's fun about this year is how much fruit I have on this tree. Look at this, guys. It is absolutely loaded. It would be fun to pick all of these and count them, but I kind of want to let them last through the season. But there must be like 100 right here. And that's just a small part of the tree. I probably have 500 avocados up here. Look at this. I mean, they're everywhere. They're loaded. And this tree I could probably hold avocados in this tree until December. So it's going to be my avocado storage system. And look at this one bract. I've already been picking a bunch too. Look at this. Can you see that? Big hanger of all those guys. And they are hanging. They're hanging this year. There's so many. They're not really big. A lot of times when you get a lot of avocados, the fruit themselves will be a bit smaller, like this one here. And when you have very few avocados in the tree, they will be bigger. Whoa. It does get a little bit tricky in here, especially barefoot. That's like a typical Haas size. Maybe it's slightly smaller than, medium-sized Haas. But I have just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. So again, imagine a day. Imagine all the trees taking over the world and everybody has something to eat. Every tree out there could be one of these trees, and you could have no food shortage anywhere. This tree hardly gets any water. But this is Littlecado. Dwarf avocado. It's also known as Wurtz. I have to look up why that happened, where there's just all these two different names for it. I really should know that, but there's a lot of things I don't know. It's kind of fun not knowing stuff. It makes the world a more mysterious place and more interesting, right? Let's just stay ignorant on some things a little bit. Maybe that's the way to go. So there you go. You've got your Littlecado. I'm going to probably pick about 30 fruit, and I should have picked them. You're supposed to pick your avocados like every week, and I think I skipped about a week and a half, so now I'm down to like 3 avocados. These avocados won't ripen for 5 or 6 days, so there'll be 4 or 5 days that I'll be either suffering and not eating avocado, or suffering because I'm gonna have to pay for them. Imagine me having to pay for avocados when you have this many avocados, but that's how much I love them. I mean, if I don't have any that are ripe and ready to go, and I'm walking through a store and I see some nice ones, whatever, man. I just pay the ransom, whatever it is. And that's all I can think of for the moment. Hopefully you're entertained. If you're not, turn it off. If you're not entertained, just, go out and play some basketball or soccer, or go surf or something. Stop watching YouTube, But if you're entertained, keep doing it. So there you go. And that's the sun going over the hill.